This brings us to the PRESOLO checklist. The PRESOLO checklist must include the 8 elements of log call. Each one of these items should have a box that must be checked before solo, indicating their compliance. Let's look at each one of them individually. First one is the knowledge element. Before solo, the CFI should explain and the student pilot should know and understand the causes and consequences of the following approach errors, including any possible combinations of them. Note that I did say explain, not demonstrate, because in my opinion, that would be a little bit unsafe. And they are as follows: low, high, slow, fast, final approach scenarios, high flare, excessive rate of descent, excessive airspeed on touchdown, rapid flare, ballooning, floating, drifting during flare, improper use of power before touchdown. Now, additionally, the CFI must explain and the student pilot must know and understand the causes and consequences of the following landing errors. We're not talking about approach errors now, we're talking about landing errors, including any possible combination of them. Note that just like before, I did say explain, not demonstrate. And they are as follows: touchdown while drifting, touchdown while crabbing, tailwind landings, wheelbarrowing, hard landing, bouncing, purposing, ground loop, gusty winds landings including wind shear, failure to apply appropriate flight control inputs during rollout, improper use of power after touchdown, improper use of toe brakes including excessive braking. And the last one, any other area that you know of and that I did miss to mention. Now, we're going to review the proficiency element. The CFI must train the student pilot until he or she is able to apply and correlate the required corrective actions to avoid or correct approach, touchdown, and ground roll errors, and especially the ability to conduct a timely and properly executed go-around confidently. This closes the loop, including the 4 levels of learning. Now, let's talk about the physical element. It is extremely important that the student pilot feel physically fit for the solo flight. If the student pilot rested, is the student pilot under any medication at all? It is critical that the student pilot determine if he or she is within the PAVE and I'm safe checklist. Next on the list is the environmental element. This is a topic that is usually not addressed before solo. How are things at the airport? Is it busy? How is the wind? How is the visibility? How is the ceiling? Is it hotter or colder than normal? Is the student pilot familiar with both of these conditions? Has the student pilot been briefed that the airplane is lighter and the performance most likely will be different? Is it the same runway where the student pilot has the most experience or feels more comfortable? Here's a tip. Remember that when learning anything, the variables must be kept constant. When teaching landings, the same runway width should be maintained. In other words, if the student starts learning on a 200-foot wide runway, keep it constant until after the student has completed at least 3 supervised solos. Then the CFI may introduce wider or narrower runways in the mix. Different runways width will delay and complicate the learning of landings. Next is the airplane and equipment condition. Does the pilot seat adjustment allows the student to see at least 3 inches below the natural horizon in order to have the proper field of vision to be able to receive all the required visual clues to make a safe landing, or a cushion is needed? This is very important. Are there any major squawks in the airplane? Are there intermittent system problems with the airplane, like brakes, nose gear shimmy, radios, transponder, doors, windows, or loose seat tracks? These things distract tremendously a student. Next, the communications element. Is the student pilot familiar with the possible ATC lingo? Clearances like short approach, 270 base to final, 270 downwind to base, extend upwind, extend downwind, square the turn to final, S turn to final, depart the pattern to the north, we'll call you back, etc. How about radio failure procedures? Light gun signals. Has the student seen those? Does he know where to look? Next, emergency or abnormal procedures. How about change of runway, runway closure, airport closure, depart to another airport on land? Is there enough fuel if diverted to another airport? Does the student pilot knows what to do if that happens? How about if a door or window opens? What to expect with a flat tire during the ground roll, either for takeoff or landing? Think about that. Now we come to the psychological element. This category, although last on the list, is in my opinion the most important of them all because it should take into consideration at least 3 areas. They are the student's level of confidence, the supervised solos, and aeronautical decision making. The level of confidence that the student pilot has in his or her ability to conduct the solo flight, especially landing the airplane, is probably the most important thing in a successful solo flight. If the CFI asks the student pilot, are you ready to solo, and the answer shows that the student pilot is not completely confident about soloing, the CFI must take a long and hard look before letting the student pilot solo. The solo flight should only be allowed when a confident attitude towards the solo is manifested. This means that the student pilot is psychologically ready for solo. If the CFI thinks that he or she lacks the ability to determine the psychological state of the student pilot before the solo flight, then a more experienced instructor should conduct the pre-solo phase check. Additionally, there may be some emotional situations like death to the family or friend, loss of employment, etc. The list is ongoing. Another contributing element under the psychological heading is the supervised solo. This happens to be an area that is not completely understood by students and CFIs. What is the supervised solo? Well, it means that the CFI must be present, observing the complete solo operation. The most important reason is that this allows the CFI to note any deficiencies that are needed to be corrected either immediately or after the flight is completed. Additionally, two-way radio communications between the CFI and the student pilot must be possible in case there is a need for the CFI to communicate with the student pilot or vice versa. This alone helps both the CFI and the student pilot in keeping the stress levels from rising. By the way, there should be at least 3 different supervised solo sessions. Remember, the CFI should fly with the student pilot right before any of the supervised solos. Don't tell the student tomorrow you will solo. This most likely will affect the student to the point that they will not even be able to sleep the night before and perform poorly the next day. Additionally, don't have the student come back the next day and take an airplane and fly solo based on the performance shown the day before. It may not be the same. Think about it. Also, the student pilot should be made aware that the goal is 3 landings maximum, and the solo session can be terminated by him or her or by the CFI at any time. There is no commitment to anything. Now comes the third item under psychological, is aeronautical decision making. This applies both to the student and the CFI. This topic requires a video of its own. Therefore, I will limit my comments to the following. The CFI should make sure that his or her decision to let the student solo and the student decision to fly solo should be considered the risks and hazards that may arise from this event by using the perceive, process, and perform model. Now that I have covered all the lot code elements, perhaps you may see that it is extremely important to comply with all of them. This alone will have a tremendous positive impact on the expected safe performance of the student pilot the day of the solo. The most important message here is make sure that the student pilot meets the checklist requirements for all the 8 elements of lot call before solo. And now, the last piece of the puzzle, how to verify that the actual deficiencies have been eliminated. Assuming that the student pilot has shown satisfactory performance in all the areas already mentioned, the student pilot must timely and properly perform at least 3 go-arounds without the instructor's intervention. Additionally, the student pilot must properly perform at least 3 takeoffs and landings to a full stop per practical test standards without the instructor's intervention. Remember the rule: 1 good approach and landing can be considered luck. 2 good ones may be considered coincidence. 3 or more means the student knows what he or she is trying to accomplish. Strike while the iron is hot. Once the CFI determines readiness to solo, it should be done right away, right then and there, providing that the circumstances are good for solo. And now, the answer to the 2 questions. If the student pilot did know and was proficient, why did lot call happen? Since knowledge and proficiency were not the elements responsible for lot call, then most likely either 1 or more of the remaining 6 contributing elements were not addressed by the CFI before solo. And the second question, if the student pilot did not know and was not proficient, why was the student pilot allowed to fly solo? The answer to this question is very easy. The CFI was not knowledgeable enough to determine if the student pilot met all the requirements of the 8 elements of lot call. However, after watching this video, there is no excuse, because now you should know. My fellow student pilots and instructors, I hope this video will shed some light on the prevention of lot call. And when you find yourself reflecting on the contents of this video, remember what Mr. Albert Einstein said, and I quote, "Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is insanity." You probably noticed that my instructional style is based on a basic common sense approach. I guarantee you that this system does make instructing and learning easy and fun, which is the best way, the way it's supposed to be. Although this method is an innovative approach to ground and flight training, it adheres to and follows all the FAA handbooks and industry recommendations, including the practical test standards and their references. My instructional videos are designed to serve as the common denominator between the student pilot, the CFI, and the examiner. You see, they do help the student to learn, the CFI to teach, and when check ride time comes, they can be used as the oral and practical test prep. And when you finish your basic training, you may keep them in your aviation library for further reference and practice. Every time the flight review comes around, you can go back and watch these videos. These videos are based on knowledge and understanding. Remember, the eye can see what the mind doesn't know. And that's why we fear what we don't know or understand. The first instructional video to be released explains in its entirety all the elements involved in learning teaching and performing safe landings every time, including all the elements that I mentioned in this video that you watched today. You will be notified soon. I hope this video avoiding load call was helpful to you. Please visit our website and subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Above all, always fly safe. I'll see you on the next video.